Say, hey, Gus. And here we are again. It's Alan and Gus. I want to talk a few minutes about Jesus, or is the idea of Jesus that these Christians talk about. Is something I really like people to think about. It's a little windy. Sorry, I'll try to speak up where you can hear me. Uh, a lot of preachers and Christians will say phrases like this. God came down, or Jesus experienced, he never sinned. And this, and that. First off, I would say, what do you mean by sin? And second off, they say that Jesus came down to earth and he was tempted by everything that man can be tempted with. And I'm not saying I don't think this is so. I believe so. But again, I feel I'm here to focus on a lot of the hypocrites that stand behind the pulpit and talk one way on Sundays and live another way the rest of the week. If God sent His Spirit down in Jesus so that He could experience all the woes of man and all the suffering and temptation that man has, then God is either not done with the job yet, or Jesus was far different than people than the Christians want to admit. Because if you take just for example, I'll just as sure as I pick on the Pentecostal preachers and the Baptist preachers and the bishops, this and that, I like to talk about the Mormons some too. But just for example, if you take someone that's born, whether they're in a Mormon family or not, and they're raised up their entire life in church and are live a perfect sin-free life according to what they consider sin, never touching, a drop of coffee or alcohol or a cigarette or anything like that. That's the way that people portray the character of Jesus to be. And if that's the case, then there is a whole massive world full of extreme temptation that Jesus never got to experience. If you take again, I'll say a Mormon or Mr. Perfect, some Baptist preacher who's, I'm a teetotaler and I'm, all right and this and that, and you place them in a house where hard drugs are being used, they're not going to be tempted by that because they know that that'll lead them to hell and this and that. If you take someone who used to be on those drugs and you place them in that house, in the same house, there's a different temptation that people who's never had any type of addictions can't even fathom. So I would ask these preachers, you're telling me that I just wonder what Jesus done for the first 30 or so years of his life. You think he ever got on the wine for a little while and then had to put it down and know what it was like to be tempted by it? Because they can't argue that he experienced everything that humans experience. If he, like if someone are tempted by women and they've been with, it's a lot easier for someone to be tempted by something that they've experienced before. And there's no argument against this. I think either God's job isn't done and He's going to send Jesus back again, but through the medium of someone who can experience more temptation. Because if not, if Jesus, this, I think to be perfect is like Jesus said. I forget which gospel it was when he seen the preacher on the front row saying, "Oh, thank God I'm not like this sinner in the back, and I'm so perfect, this and that." And the guy in the back beat his chest and said, "Have mercy on me, I'm a sinner." And Jesus said that guy was the right one. It's much more like that. What you consider sin. I don't think he would have ever stolen anything or coveted stuff, but he would have had to have, had experience with substances or something like that. Again, unless God's sending him back to, it would be in the form of like that, because it can't be denied. There's a whole vast realm of human experience and temptation that God has no idea about if that's the case. And people don't, it's just so simple. They say Paul said, and Paul said, he was tempted like everyone. I tired of hearing people talk about the Saint Paul. They quote him more than they do Jesus. I'll but yeah, I'll just repeat myself again. Not make the video too long, but is that not the truth? If people actually believe in the Spirit of Jesus and that he's was here and still here and always is, he's missing something. There's a world of temptation that humans can experience that he's either has experienced and it isn't say people just, I would say it isn't written about, but the Bible doesn't ever mention Jesus, you know, using the bathroom. Does that mean he never used the bathroom? Come on. It's just it's quite it's something to think about. There's so much temptation going on in the world, and for people to perceive Jesus as, like this clean cut, perfect guy who's never done nothing wrong. Again, like I said at the first, it's like, what do you mean by sin? If someone, works a job and they live on their own and they decide to, drink a bottle or two of wine every night and throw up and wake up and go back to work the next day, and they, continue to live a positive life, and just that's what they do. Is that sinning? People say, "Oh, Paul said to stay." Paul said, Paul said, Paul said. I get so tired of hearing that, especially from blatant hypocrites, blatant hypocrites. But it's something I want to touch on, and I may do some writing on it and stuff too. Either God's job isn't done, and if He sends Jesus back again, it would be to experience. I said, until somebody's been on opiates, until somebody's been on fentanyl or heroin, and then gotten off from it, and very shortly after getting off from it are submerged with it all around you, you don't know what temptation is until you experience something like that. So how would Jesus know what temptations that we all have, unless, again, God's doing a redo or a return or something like that? It's something to think about. Uh, I was going to talk about something else. I want to make another video on about biblical stuff or what have you. But I'll just keep saying the same thing over and over. There's 90+% of the world who has experienced more than what Jesus did. Yeah, he went through an awful lot with getting literally beaten to death, and basically not opening his mouth. And that's, they'd say, oh, he's tempted to speak out. What was he tempted with? And it's just something I think is worth considering. So I hope everybody likes my haircut. I do it myself with scissors, and if they don't, I do not care what anybody thinks about anything, except for, just be nice to one another. And I think, or is that everything, Gus? Well, say something, Gus. Okay. Yeah, I'd like, if you have any comments, or think that this is an interesting subject, then please feel free to let me know. And again, be nice to each other. And thanks for watching.